a lot of the time parents want their kid to be like fixed and think that I think a lot of the time if parents are brought into the therapy, they see it as like they're the problem. And I love in the emotion-focused family therapy model, it's like, no, you're not being brought in because you're the problem. You're being brought in because you're part of the solution.
Welcome to Lived In by Zoe Therapy Services. I'm your host, Micah Faye, and I'm excited to share with you a community of experts who specialize in helping you feel fantastic. That's what Lived In aims to be, an online hub for DIY wellness led by the experts and curated by folks who care. In this wellness series, I interview Richmond community leaders, vendors, and healers to empower you with a toolkit, one filled with healthy practices to make every day just a little bit better. So welcome to Lived In, your online comfy couch surrounded by friends and supported by experts. Come on in. We're excited to have you. Hi friends, and welcome back to Lived In. I'm your host, Micah Faye, and today we are here with Mahala Jordan, and not only is she an LPC, but she is also a registered art therapist, or ATR. So, Ms. Mahala, can you please tell me, what does it mean to be an art therapist?
Well, it means to be a therapist who does art and incorporates art into some of the work. That being said, COVID has sort of thrown a wrench in things in a lot of ways because it's really hard to do art therapy over video and like not in person. So recently it's just meant to be a therapist.
Right. I think when people think of art therapy, they have sort of a conception that it's like for little kids and that it's for like after parents get divorced, you send your kid to art therapy, they draw some puppies and they work it out. Mm-hmm. How true is that perception? I assume not at all.
That's like 10% true.
Okay. So tell me more. What is actually true?
So there are the cases of like you need assessment to figure out what's going on with someone, and art therapy can help get at stuff that words can't. And so your little kid who's been abused or like has gone through a divorce, whatever. Same thing is true for adults. Like we can't access a lot of stuff from childhood, so art therapy can be helpful in that way. But a lot of the time it's more like art as therapy, like doing art is healing and helpful. And sometimes it's just like doodling or making art while you're talking can help you to open up and get the juices flowing. Sometimes it's like using art as a tool to figure something out. A lot of people are not word people, they're more visual people, and so it can be helpful in that way to like figure out a new concept or work through something.
Yeah. That's interesting. You said a lot of people are visual. Is that true in your experience? A lot of people are more visual than they are verbal or linguistic?
I don't know, actually. That's a good question. Maybe I'm a visual person.
And I'm so incredibly linguistic. So I was caught onto that immediately. Oh, cool. Okay, so then when you go to art therapy school, do you learn techniques of both art and therapy? Do you figure it out as you go? I just like really I can't imagine what you do when you go into a session. Can you help me understand what you do when you go into a session?
Yeah, going into a session I feel like is a lot of the time kind of free form and you figure it out as you go, depending on what the client is presenting with. I do think like if you're doing strictly art therapy, there tends to be more planning ahead. Like today we're going to do this directive to address whatever issue I feel like would be important to address at the time. I don't love doing that sometimes just because I prefer to be more client-centered and like, what's bringing you in today? Like, what do you want to talk about today? And I don't like to drive the car of their therapy. So I think I tend to use more of like intuition, but then also letting them kind of lead the way. And if it seems like an art therapy intervention might be helpful, I'll like throw it out there as an idea. And we'll do it if they're interested.
And if they're resistant?
then we won't do it.
Yeah. So then you're also a true therapist. Because when I talked to Julie, like we spent most of the time talking about art techniques that she uses, right? But it sounds like you maybe kind of straddle the line and use art therapy in an additive sort of a way, or is that true?
Yeah, I think that is true.
Yeah.
Probably partly because, like, when I was in grad school getting my art therapy degree and doing my art therapy internships and stuff, I was like the adjunct therapist doing the art therapy for people who had their primary therapist.
I see.
But then when I started working, I was like the primary therapist, and I wasn't assigned clients because they were interested in art therapy. I was just assigned clients. And so that's really different working with people who didn't necessarily sign up to be working with an art therapist versus like you go see your LCSW and then you come to art therapy group or individual to do some like on the side work. Cool. If that makes sense. So I think given the work that I've been doing since grad school, I've started using art more as an additive thing because that's not always what clients are looking for.
Well, I definitely want to talk about grad school because I know you did some really cool stuff there. I'm curious though, how can you tell if a client that has just come to you as an LPC, how can you tell if they might be amenable to trying art? Or do you just sort of slip it in front of them and watch it happen?
Normally when I'm introducing myself, I explain like what my background is in, and when I mention that I'm an art therapist, some people are like, ooh, that's cool, and that kind of clues me into the fact that they might be interested. Other times they don't seem to really care that much, and I don't really push it on them.
Yeah. So you see folks of all ages?
Yeah, although the majority of the people I've been seeing here at Zoe so far have been young adults.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm a teacher of young adults. And I know how hard-headed they can be about doing something new and different. When you're working with a teen, not a kid, but a teen, how do you sort of, not break down the walls, that's the wrong phrase, but like that's the phrase that's in my head right now, you know what I mean? How do you create buy-in? Yeah.
Definitely about building the relationship first and like getting on their level and becoming a person who's relatable and who they feel like they can talk to and trust. And once that's established, there's a lot more willingness to like try something new and be vulnerable and all of that. And I think with art therapy in particular, like most people stopped drawing when they were like 11. And so they're drawing at like a fifth grader level, that's like vulnerable and kind of embarrassing for a lot of people. Like it takes some courage to draw something for the first time in a number of years or like at a developmental level lower than where you are. So I think that trust is like so key.
I had never thought of it that way, but that makes total sense. And we, as like a capitalist nation, we try to monetize things that should just be like fun and beautiful. So when we stop being good at art at 11, we stop doing it because it's not something we can make into a career. And even at 11, we're told that.
Yeah.
That's bonkers. Whoa. So then how do you guide, like let's say someone is interested, but they're not an artist. How do you guide them? Do you teach them technique or do you just say like we're just going to do it together, like whatever it is?
I think if one of their needs is like to build a sense of mastery and self-esteem, then yeah, teaching them like new art techniques can be helpful to give them that sense of like, I can do something. But a lot of the time, if we're addressing other issues, that might not be as important. And so then it's more about redefining what good means. And maybe good is that you enjoyed yourself, or good is that you tried something new, or good is that you were able to express an idea. It's not about like the aesthetics of it and how it turned out.
Yeah. It's cool, defining good for oneself.
Yeah.
or like retelling that narrative in your own mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what is your art like? I assume you make art. Am I correct in this assumption?
Yeah.
Tell me about your art.
So I've been doing a combination of painting and embroidery recently. Yeah. My background is more in oil painting, but as I started working full time, it was a lot harder to like find hours at a time to set aside to do art. It's a lot of setup and cleanup and takes up a lot of space and requires energy and all of that. Yeah. So it's not a great like after work in the evening kind of hobby. Yeah. So for my paintings, I do like geometric designs and almost like wallpaper type designs.
Oh, cool.
And then I used to do a lot more portraiture, and I'd like put portraits on top of those backgrounds. Now I do more of just the backgrounds. And then with the embroidery, that's been great for the like after work evening decompress kind of thing. And I've mostly been embroidering like floral things and house plants, just like fun random things.
So what was your journey to your art like? Were you an artist as a kid?
Apparently I started drawing when I was like 11 months old, and my parents have all these like early Mahala paintings where it was like several hours of little me just painting colors, and I would end up with like a brown sheet of paper because I would just like paint color after color after color on the same page and get them all muddy. But yeah, I've liked making art for a long time.
That's really cute. Wow. And so when you went to school for undergrad, was that what you were pursuing, or were you pursuing psych? Which way were you going?
Yeah, I ended up majoring in painting. I thought about psychology. I thought about a lot of different things. I was also like trying to continue pursuing French from high school and then like start learning Spanish too. And so eventually I decided like doing a double major was just not going to allow me to take the other classes that I wanted to take. Yeah. So I did art. And then like by my senior year, I knew I was going to go to grad school for art therapy. So I did have a couple of psych classes as like prerequisites and stuff.
Wow. How did you know?
It took me a long time to arrive at that. I think, so I had a friend in high school who was she was like horrifically abused when she was little and had like more assault kind of stuff in high school. And I was one of her confidants, and I felt honored being in that role, but also had no idea what to do to help her. And it was just kind of like stressful and scary, but wanted to be able to help people. And so I started becoming interested in it at that point. Someone told me about art therapy. I talked to a family friend who's a psychologist, and she was like, don't do that. Like, no one cares about art therapists. It's a dying field.
Oh, girl.
So then I went to college and like was pursuing painting, and then she reached back out and she was like, just kidding. It's like on the rise now. Like, you should totally do it. So.
Okay, auntie.
Yeah. So yeah, and art therapy was really taking off at that point, so it seemed appropriate.
Yeah.
And I had decided at that point, after doing a number of years of like spending so much time making art, that I did not want to do that for my work. I felt like it would suck the joy out of it.
Yeah.
And like I'm an introvert and I love being alone, but I didn't think it would be healthy for me to like be alone all day for my work. I felt like I needed to be able to be with people. Just felt so stressful too, the idea of like having to sell stuff and like make things for a market and not for just enjoying it. So yeah.
That's really powerful. I hope you're proud that you found your way, genuinely. Like, that's really hard to do, to discern in oneself what's right.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I want to go back to this perception of art therapy, because I think I kind of thought it was what your aunt said until I started talking to Julie. And I told Julie my only art therapy story, which was that I was sent to art therapy at a very young age, and I wasn't told it was therapy, and this lady just kept asking me personal questions, and I would be like, ma'am, I'm drawing a dog, and that's not your business, so I would like to draw this dog now, ma'am. And that's my only connection to it. So, what are the stereotypes, perceptions, whatever? How do you combat them in your everyday life and work?
That's a great question. I think a lot of people are worried about with art therapy that they're just going to like make stuff that's going to be analyzed, and that's scary. They don't want someone to like have access to interpret all of these things about them that they don't know about themselves. And like, that's not really what it is. There are symbols and like things in art that people make that often say something about them, but it's more about like their process of making it and what these symbols mean to them. And it's not just like you look at a random piece of art and you can know what it says about a person. So that's something that I think needs to be combated a lot of the time.
Yeah.
The idea that it's just for kids, that's another common one, common misperception.
So how would a grown-up know that maybe art therapy is something they should seek out?
I think if they have tried more like talk therapy methods and it has not been helpful, they're not getting anywhere, that would be a good signal that they might want to try something different.
Yeah.
People who often repress emotions, art therapy is helpful for accessing that. I did one of my internships in grad school at a residential treatment center for adults with addictions, and it was like super helpful in that setting.
Yeah.
There were just like so many years of burying stuff and self-medicating to avoid having to deal with stuff, and so the art therapy was helpful in bringing that up in a way that felt less threatening, because they didn't have to say it.
I wonder, because addiction is sort of so amorphous still in the scientific fields, I wonder what studies have been done that link art to some level of healing, or if any. That would be cool to know about further. So you keep coming back to grad school, so I want to talk to you about it. So I know in grad school you wrote your thesis?
That was actually for my PhD.
Your PhD, okay.
Yeah.
So for your PhD, you wrote your thesis on financial wellness for folks our age, I think is what you told me. Am I right about that?
That's, yeah, the gist of it. It was about people in their 20s achieving financial independence, or like the ability to pay for themselves to do life.
Okay, so tell me about that, because I can't imagine. I was financially independent in like maybe 15, so I can't imagine not being financially independent. So tell me about that, please.
Yeah, so over the past couple of decades, it's become so much harder to afford to live because cost of living has gone way up, and especially for people who pursue higher education, that is just so crazy expensive. That between those costs and student loans and then trying to afford housing, and wages have not gone up accordingly. So there's so many people who are in their mid to late 20s, even into their 30s, who like live with their parents at home because they can't afford not to, or they live on their own, but they have continued support from their parents for a lot longer than people used to. Like it's not uncommon today for people to still be getting parental financial support in their 20s, which in the past that was not the case. Like you graduate college, you're on your own. You can like buy a house at 23. It's no big deal. And things are different now.
And we're talking specifically in America, because in Europe, people
Yes.
frequently live with their parents until they're in their late 20s, early 30s.
Yes, specifically in the United States, where it's often kind of looked down upon for people to live at home. It's seen as like you're doing that because you have no other option. So along with not being able to afford to live your own life independently, there's a lot of stigma and guilt and shame and feeling like you're not good enough. Because you went to college to get a degree so that you could pay for yourself, and now you can't. And that's just like devastating for a lot of people.
So what did you find in your research?
I found that, so even for my study was on people who have already achieved financial independence, so they're on the other side. So it was kind of retrospective, like looking back at their experience of getting there. And it was really painful for a lot of people because like before becoming financially independent, they were not. And they talked a lot about the struggle of having to make ends meet when they didn't really earn enough to do that. Student loans were just crushing. Soul crushing was a frequently used word to describe that. And then the other thing that was really interesting that I found was just how often luck and privilege were cited as like the primary contributing factors to their ability to reach where they are now, which is not surprising. But yeah, everyone mentioned either luck or privilege or both.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So how did it break down in different demographics? So like brown and black people, they have considerably less privilege in our society, right?
Yeah, so this was what was crazy.
Okay.
I did a small qualitative study. There were only 10 participants.
Okay.
And they were all white. Which it wasn't like I'm looking for white people in their 20s. It was just like that was who responded to the ad. And so I obviously talked about that quite a bit in my discussion of my results.
Right.
And there's so much debate in the literature about like, are people who are white financially independent in their 20s because they get all this parental support earlier on that people of color don't get? Or is it that like they didn't have to be financially independent, so they weren't until later? Like there's not enough research about where people of color are financially in their 20s to really know like what their situation is and what contributes to the differences between white people and people of color.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, of course,
it's like a huge gap.
Would we expect that these United States of America would have studied people of color in any meaningful way? Absolutely not. So.
Right. There is definitely evidence of like student loans disproportionately impacting people of color. Yeah. So that's a thing. The other piece of it, though, that I was reading about after kind of coming to certain conclusions based on my interviews was there is different cultural norms in different racial groups. And so for certain groups of color, it is more common for people to live at home in their 20s than it is for white people. So I wasn't sure how that played into things at all. One of my exclusion criteria was you could not be living at home with your parents to participate in the study.
So maybe that skewed your pool a little bit?
Could have skewed my pool for sure.
I really said skewed your pool. This is a cool study. I had no idea it was like so small and that you had done so much thinking about the exclusions that were that were the things that couldn't be measured. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one, and you had to be a college graduate.
Okay.
And so that probably disproportionately like ruled out people of color too, because they graduate at lower rates than white people, in part because of student loans and like the high cost of going to college, and white families can afford college more than families of color can because of the economic side of things. And
yeah.
So, yeah.
Wow. Can I ask, And you don't have to answer if it's personal. Can I ask why you wanted to do this study?
Yeah, I think in part I started out with this topic more on just like an emerging adulthood college experience side of things, but there's already a lot of research on that.
Yeah.
I was interested particularly in the idea that so many people go get this really crazy expensive degree and put so much time in and come out with really no idea of what they want to do after going to college, which was probably because I had a number of friends in that boat. But there's too much research about that, so I had to kind of find something where there was more of a gap.
Okay.
And this was something that there wasn't a ton of information about. And then on a more personal level, like I was in grad school, my husband was in grad school. We were living on my like measly starting out income and have student loans out the wazoo. And so I was like one of the people who could not participate in my study because we were like living on loans for so long.
Wow. What principles did you learn through your study that young folks can focus on to become financially well? Because you said it was a retrospective, right? So they'd worked, well, hold on, sorry, that was super capitalist. They have gone through a system which told them that they pulled themselves up by their bootstraps when likely their bootstraps were gilded.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So what did you learn? What are some things that young folks can do in their early 20s?
So that's exactly it, was that like you can't tell people, oh, you should just go be born super privileged into a rich family with lots of resources who can like help you pay for college and like allow you to live at home after for 2 years so you can save up a bunch of money. Like you can't, that's not helpful because that's not accessible for a lot of people. So there were a couple of things like people talking about how like, oh, I didn't think at all about the student loans I was taking out before I did. And I just like signed something without reading it and then graduate. Now I have $55,000 of loans and I can't afford the payments. And so like read things before you sign them and like learn about what you're getting into. And when you're 17 and like getting ready to go to college, you're so young. It's like such a big thing to be taking on.
Yeah.
So like use your support network, whether that's your parents or your teachers at school or other adults in your life, to like learn more about what you're signing up for. And then obviously just like living frugally is helpful.
Yeah.
Although that being said, I think a lot of people talked about how it's an issue of balance too. Like you don't want to be miserable for 5 years just in order to like save up to a place where you can be financially more stable.
Yeah.
So like some people decided to live on their own, even though it meant that they wouldn't be able to save anything. Yeah. Because they didn't want to have roommates, and that hadn't gone well in the past. And then another thing that people talked about a lot was not knowing what their future income would be like in the field that they were going into. And there's so much encouragement to like do something you're passionate about, but like not that added realism of what does that mean for you when you're an actual adult, and like what does this future income look like in terms of the lifestyle you can live. Yeah. So even sometimes when people knew how much they could expect to be able to earn, they didn't know what that meant for their lifestyle choices, and are now disappointed based on that.
Definitely. You know, both of my parents went to college for I think a year, less than maybe, and they, my grandmother actually is a doctor, but a doctor of philosophy and religion. But in like the rural poverty situation we were in, they couldn't help me. I didn't like. I was in the IB program, straight A's, starred in every play I was in, had 3 jobs. Like I should have gotten scholarships, but we didn't know about that. So like, then when we did the
FAFSA.
Yep.
Yeah.
I wasn't able to get any aid because of something that had happened with my parents. Not because they made too much money, but because of another thing. And so At 17, knowing what I was doing, I signed alone these massive loans because I just didn't know. And as a teacher, that's a thing that I feel my kids on every day, is they'll come to me and they'll be like, hey, could you help me apply for this scholarship? And I'm like, I don't know how. Let's go to the counselors together. You know what I mean? And it feels awful because I paid my way through grad school semester by semester. I'll be done in like 21 days. My thesis is approved.
Nice.
And, you know, I paid semester by semester my last 2 years of college by taking 2 years off in between. And I just feel like I can't help my kiddos in any meaningful way when they go to read these huge documents or ask me to write letters of recommendation for this scholarship, because I don't know what those people want to hear.
Right.
You know? Like, Jania's a great friend. Like, they probably don't care, you know?
Yeah.
How do we help them? I don't know. How do we help them understand the paperwork that they're reading? Like, your advice was to use your support system. I'm the support system. What should I know about whatever the heck is being said in that paperwork, you know? Do you know?
No, I don't know. I think it's not all about the paperwork. A lot of it is about the relationship.
Yeah.
And the people I interviewed did talk about like how important mentorship was to them, and having someone who they could go to as a guide. Not necessarily about like, how do I fill out this form, but like talking about what kind of work they wanted to do and what was realistic for them, and balancing their passions with their like financial goals in the future. And just like having that person who they trusted, who was older than them, who they could kind of bounce ideas off of.
Yeah. Balancing their passion with their future finances. That's big, Mahala.
I had a lot of like, I majored in music, I majored in art, and now I'm not doing that.
You.
Yeah.
Huh. Do you think the messaging, were you ever to have or adopt a child, do you think your messaging would be different than do whatever you want to do?
I think so.
Ooh, what would it be? Tell me. This will be helpful.
Well, so I think like my mom was raised in a relatively poor household, and so she was brought up with like, you have to do something to make money. It does not matter if you like it. And she was like pushed to go to business school by her parents for like undergrad, and worked as an accountant, and like probably made a pretty good salary, but then
Hated it.
Yeah. And so actually both of my parents went to undergrad twice,
Cool.
because they decided that they wanted to pursue a different career. My mom more so because she had majored in something that was financially lucrative, but not that she enjoyed. My dad kind of the opposite of that.
Yeah.
And so my mom went back to nursing school and then became a nurse.
Wow.
And my dad majored in biology and then was like, well, this is not helpful. So then he went and got his second bachelor's in architecture and works as an architect. So they were always pushing, like, do what you love, do your passion, probably in large part because of my mom's experience of, like, having to go back and do it all again because she had not pursued her passion the first time. But, like, I had no idea what kind of money artists could make in life. And whenever my parents talked about money, it was so abstract. Like, I had no idea how much money you needed to be able to afford to live like a middle-class lifestyle. And it didn't help that, like, I was in high school during the financial crisis, and, like, my dad was self-employed, so we had no income as a family for, like, 2 years.
Yeah.
And so I was like, it's fine. Like, you don't need money to live.
Right.
not knowing like what was happening behind the scenes for my parents at that time.
Yeah. I had the exact opposite of experience. I was always forced to be very aware of exactly how much money it took to stay afloat. And so when I got my first $35,000 a year job, I was like, look at me go. There are 2 digits and they don't start with 1. Because I was making bank according to the standards. But that's another interesting thing. You know, being a teacher, I make so little money, and I will continue as long as I am a teacher to make so little money, which is why I have 3 jobs, this one included, right? Mm-hmm. But to my daddy, he goes around telling people my daughter is a school teacher, because for him and his, that's like a big deal to make the kind of money that a school teacher. And my daddy's a contractor. He's very good at his job, and he used to make the big bucks back in the day, you know what I mean? But for him, growing up and experiencing what he did, me making my little bit of money, that 3,500 number, you know, that teachers start out at in Virginia, was huge. And I couldn't, when I was signing those papers, I could not imagine a life making more than that. And now I'm here, and I'm like, I need to get a new job. You know what I mean?
It's very true. When you're like 23 and starting out, and you don't have anyone else to support, and you're like kind of living on your own, doing your own thing, it's a lot easier to make that kind of money work.
Right.
As you get older and think about like this, a lot of my participants in my study were talking about like, it's fine now, but as I think about like wanting to start a family someday, I'm like, how can this salary work for that? And there's not a lot of growth in a lot of fields that people go into.
Yeah. So how has your work, and your husband's, because he was in grad school with you, I assume, how has that affected sort of the way that y'all live every day now?
We live very frugally.
Okay. Love it. Tell me more.
Yeah, we're like, I mean, we both have graduated in the past year, and so it's very fresh not to be in school and not to be like scraping every extra penny to go to tuition. So having like a little bit more autonomy to like buy something just because we want it at the grocery store and not because it's an essential ingredient in what we're making. Or like, we can buy an avocado.
One. Just one.
Because it's on sale.
The 99-cent avocado became 79 cents, and so you get the avocado.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it. It's weird that I know how much avocados cost and what they are on sale. Okay, so we live frugally. May I ask what your husband does? Is he also a therapist?
No, he was in medical school, and now he's a resident.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So you never see each other, huh?
Not this month.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. There's months when it's good, and there's months when it's not so good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How has, I guess, your art therapy changed the way you talk to people? I guess him included, but kind of any old body, you know?
People think that therapists must be really great at communicating in their own personal life, and that's not always the case. Because it's really hard to apply the same skills to your own life, or like see the same perspective on your own life that you can see on other people's. So honestly, I don't think it affects it that much.
Really?
Yeah, unless we're in an argument, then I feel like I have a leg up because I can I like teach communication skills as my job, and so I have a better sense of like how to say things in a way that communicates my point more effectively.
Yeah.
I feel like I have 2 younger sisters, and I often use my like supportive therapist voice when talking to them, but not in a way that's like being their therapist, because that wouldn't be cool.
No.
Just like being a supportive person.
Yeah, for them.
Mm-hmm.
I asked Julie the same question, but I'm curious how different your answers will be. What is like an activity that can be self-guided? So I don't need to, be an artist or see an artist, that people can do as like an anxiety reducer or sort of a mood lifter. And I was just thinking about you hanging out with your little sisters and like, maybe you craft together, and I thought that was a cute mental image. So I'm curious now, what's like the one thing everyone can do and should try, do you think?
I hate to say coloring because it's so like overrated right now and like hyped up.
Right.
But I think that is accessible to a lot of people. Mandalas are great. Mm-hmm. They're like grounding and centering. Yeah. And for people who are anxious about like not wanting to make something ugly, I think coloring books are helpful in that they
can't be ugly, really.
Yeah. All you have to do is fill in the lines. It's more like meditative than creative, and it doesn't take a lot of mental energy.
Okay. Is there something one should be trying to focus on when one colors? I think I get more stressed if you tell me, like, here is a line, draw inside of it. Is there, like, something you're supposed to be ruminating on while you do that? That would be good to do.
Maybe not ruminating on whatever you're stressed about.
Yeah. I'm like, this stupid line. I don't like this line.
Yeah, I guess just like trying to pay attention to what it feels like to be using the materials and like what that motion feels like. A lot of people aren't used to paying attention to how it feels in their body to be doing what they're doing.
Oh, I see. Cool. I think Julie said keychains.
Keychains?
Make keychains. I'm pretty sure. She also talked about coloring pages. But I think she said make keychains. Sorry, Julie, if I'm wrong. I said, that's adorable. You remember, you were a kid in the 90s too, right?
Yeah.
Okay. You'd like make a little crocodile and he like had, you know what I'm talking about? It was always a crocodile. I don't know why. Like those kind of keychains, I think is what she was meaning.
But that is kind of similarly meditative, I think.
Yeah. Just about feeling the things move through your hands, focusing on your hands. I think that's what she talked about, at least. Maybe I'm totally wrong. She also makes keychains. That I do remember as one of her mediums is the medium of the keychain. So, so Mahala, what's your latest thing? What are you learning about recently? What's next? You just got your freaking doctorate. So like, what's next?
I'm trying to turn my dissertation into an article. So that's been a bit of a project.
Okay.
Other than that, more on the like therapy side of things, I've recently learned about emotion-focused family therapy, which I had not learned about in grad school, and I'm really loving that technique. So been reading about that and trying to incorporate more of that in my work.
What is it?
It's more of a like caregiver-based approach. So training the caregiver of the identified client how to interact with them in a way that's more supportive of the client becoming more mentally healthy. So it's a great model for like kids and adolescents, and I've been using it with some of those clients quite a bit. The premise of it, though, is emotion coaching, which is like helping people understand what emotions they're experiencing, and then also helping them to understand that you get it, because people are not receptive to like trying new things or doing what you want them to do. If they think that you don't understand what they're going through, they're just going to like argue with you.
Yeah. Don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. So it's kind of scripted, but it's like, I can understand why you're feeling X, Y, and Z because, and like trying to connect with them before using more of the more standard like behavior adjustment parenting strategies.
So it's largely for parents then?
Largely for parents. You can use it as a like spouse or as a like grandparent. It doesn't have to be a parent and child dynamic.
Cool. This actually sounds really neat. Is there like a market for that, for teaching people how to be better caregivers currently?
I'd say it can sometimes be tough convincing people that this is the most effective approach. A lot of the time, parents want their kid to be like fixed and think that I think a lot of the time if parents are brought into the therapy, they see it as like they're the problem. Mm-hmm. And I love in the emotion-focused family therapy model, it's like, no, you're not being brought in because you're the problem. You're being brought in because you're part of the solution.
Yeah, there's like a sense of fault, I would imagine, if you're a parent whose kid needs therapy just to begin with. And then if a therapist is like, hey, Mom, I need to talk to you, it's probably really nerve-wracking, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huge sense of shame and self-blame.
Yeah. Okay, well, if a parent or a kiddo or any aged human wants to come hang out with you, how do they find you?
They can find me on our website,
ZoeTherapyServices.com.
Or on Psychology Today.
Yes, they could find you there too. Do you currently remember our office number? Because I am 804-303-9622. Why did that take so long?
I had such an embarrassing situation like 2 weeks ago. One of my clients who I had scheduled was not in the Doxy waiting room. Mm-hmm. And so I called her and she didn't pick up. So I was leaving a voicemail and I was like, give us a call back at 804. And I could not remember the number. And then I was like frantically trying to find the number, but my computer was frozen, so I couldn't find it. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot find the number. Like on the voicemail.
It's on your business card. Where was your business card?
I didn't have one. Oh. But then I was so lucky because the voicemail somehow knew that I'd been silent for like a long time. It was like, do you want to send this message or do you want to delete it?
No.
I was like, so I deleted it and then I found the number and then I called back.
Did she pick up eventually?
No, she didn't. So I left an actual like sane voicemail.
Love that for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I asked her when I saw her which one she got. She got the normal one, so that was good.
Well, you heard it here, folks. If you want to hang out with Dr. Mahala Jordan, you can give us a call at 804-303-9622 or visit our website, ZoeTherapyServices.com, which I run, so send any compliments my way. It was really cool to hang out. I appreciate you, even though you are an introvert, coming and hanging out with us today and talking about your practice. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Micah. It was cool hanging out with you too.